Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tony Spera. Welcome once again to Seekers of the Supernatural with Ed and Lorraine Warren. I'd like to ask a question if I could. Do you believe that love survives the grave? Do you believe that there are such things as beautiful love stories in the spirit world? I know we've talked in the past about hauntings, about horrific encounters with ghosts and demons and devils and things like that. But do you believe that there is beauty in the spirit world? Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you will hear of such love stories, such lovely stories, I should say. We start out with a place called Hollybush, England. It was back in 1915 when two lovers, one by the name of Walter Weaver and another by the name of Doris May, who lived and loved and died and survived the grave. I'd like to start with you, Lorraine, if I could.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me some examples, before we get into Hollybush, of encounters that you know of where people have survived the grave?
Tony, we are contacted weekly by people who receive visits from loved ones. They're not hauntings. You wouldn't even call them a haunting. I also get numerous phone calls from people who will say, would you be willing to communicate with my loved ones? And I would say that is one thing we don't do. If a loved one wishes, and they will, to communicate with us, then that's within God's law. But not when we have to conjure the spirit in order to try to get communication. We lectured, Tony, some time ago. This was a beautiful story. It was a woman's club in Waterbury. And this one elderly lady, lovely, lovely woman, raised her hand and told us how her husband came to her, actually took over the wheel of her car in the Colorado Hills when she became lost and more or less kind of stranded when a snowstorm came up, which can happen very, very easily. He told her to remain very calm, and although it was totally impossible for her to maneuver that car, he was able to get her down to a level away from that snow where she was all right, and then he left. I received another such story told to me up in the area near where you live, right near Torrington. A young woman told me how her brother-in-law had been killed on Route 8 just outside of Torrington in an ice storm, and how he lost control of his car and it went down an embankment into another vehicle. But she herself actually asked him, when she was in a similar situation during an ice storm on Route 8 about 4 or 5 years ago, to help her and be there. And for a brief moment, he appeared right next to her. There are so many stories, Tony, that we receive.
I think one of the most beautiful ones I've ever heard of took place right over in Monroe. This gentleman traveled the world, went to China an awful lot, the Orient. Well, he died. He was, I guess, in his late 70s. His wife survived him, and she lived to be, I guess, 87, 88 years old, but she was incapacitated to the extent that she had to have nurses around the clock.
Mm-hmm.
And the night nurses, after midnight, many times would walk into her bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
and they would see her deceased husband sitting in a chair right alongside of her.
Mm-hmm.
And she would be talking to him, and they would hear a voice coming from him. And when he would look around and see them, he would just disappear.
Yeah, and they would tell us, more than one nurse attested to this, Tony. She was a very wealthy woman, and she had nurses round the clock and died in her own home. But there was a long, rather wide hallway leading to the bedroom part of this home.
Mm-hmm.
And they would tell that they knew when he was there, because as they started to go down that hallway, they would feel the coldness emanating from the spirit where the energy had been drawn. And they would go in and they would see him sitting right by her.
I think one of the funniest stories I've ever heard, Torrington, up near where you live, Tony.
Oh yeah, that
This lady told us that her husband died, and for some reason she was a little bit dubious about going into her bedroom, going to sleep in bed at night. So she'd sleep on the couch. She'd watch television, and then she'd fall off to sleep. But one night, she's lying there, and all of a sudden, the rocking chair, which was next to the couch, started going back and forth. It drew her attention. She looked, and there's her husband sitting there. And he said, "Dear, are you all right?" And she got so scared. She jumped off the couch, ran down the stairs, jumped into her car, and went to her daughter's house and stayed there for a week. And they said, "Well, Mom, you must have just imagined that." So she said, "All right." So she went back home again. So again, you know, she's watching television. She falls off to sleep, and the rocking chair is going again. And there's the husband. "Are you all right, dear?" And again, she takes off and flies out of the house. So she comes back in a couple of nights, and they said, "Mom, you must be imagining this." So it happens a third time, and this time she said to herself, "I'm going to answer him this time." And he said, "Dear, are you all right?" She says, "I'm fine. Would you please just go?" And after that, he was gone.
She actually watched him. She was a nurse. Is that Charlotte Hungerford Hospital?
Yes, Charlotte Hungerford.
She was a nurse in Charlotte Hungerford Hospital. And she watched him, Tony, she watched him walk by the couch into the bedroom, and then he was gone.
He wanted to make sure that she was all right.
So do you think routinely, though, say married couples or lovers,
Oh, God, yes, Tony.
they're routinely that they come back to watch over, perhaps?
Yes, positively.
Guide. And what about mothers? What about mothers that die?
Is it that you're thinking of them, you're drawing them, or you think they want to come back and to help?
Well, I